about AdWords section of shopping campaigns, understanding campaign structures becomes very critical. The right campaign structure should take into account the holistic business goals, reporting criteria, optimization access, and more importantly, hassle-free management. Let's see how we can put all this into perspective for e-commerce players and create an effective campaign structure. We approach the AdWords management from two sides: standalone brands versus marketplace scenarios. A single brand or non-e-commerce marketplace player would have a feed size between few hundred to 50,000 SKUs that include variants versus a marketplace where feed depth would vary from 100,000 to 5 million SKUs. This set of products would contain a mixed bag of best performing categories, brands, and some that don't work as well. As mentioned earlier, effective campaign structures are a result of marrying the business goals with consumer behavior. Different business goals like visits, transactions, revenue demand a different access to create campaigns around. For a standalone brand, if you're optimizing for sessions and are optimizing on a cost per session metric, identify categories that drive traffic at lower CPCs and promote them via separate campaigns. However, as we move down the funnel where you optimize for transactions and ROI, having category campaigns with brand and price segmented ad groups will help drive better efficiencies. Let's take a look at how an ideal campaign structure would look like. Products that are segmented by category, then by brand, then by SKU, and a bid that is placed at the most fine-grained level. An important point to keep in mind when subdividing product groups is to ensure that the density of SKUs at product group level should be large enough to drive minimum number of impressions. Expanding the example of this e-commerce retailer leads us to exploring marketplaces. Marketplaces vary from standalone brands in the sense that there are a lot of variables in terms of sellers, margins, warehouse management, etc. Marketplaces are brand and category agnostic and operate typically on ROI goals. In this scenario, programmatic bidding based on data analytics becomes important, which we'll be covering extensively in the next webinar. From a campaign structuring standpoint, we'd recommend to understand the data segment access, the demand, different bid, budget management, different new versus returning user acquisition patterns, and then build campaigns accordingly. Approaching marketplaces is also tricky because the same product could be available from multiple sellers. This would be a classic example of variants of same product, which I have touched upon in the last webinar as well. To make sure we drive the best ad experience, we need to take into account metrics like seller ratings, reviews for every product, and then bid on them accordingly. This brings us to understanding two unique settings that are applicable to shopping campaigns only. Let's start with inventory filters. Shopping campaigns work on product targeting, and filtering the right products to target from these campaigns becomes important. Google provides us with an inventory filter option at a campaign level. Inventory filter can be applied on product type, brand, category, and custom labels. We can use multiple filters with AND conditions to filter products on multiple attributes. Inventory filter is useful for both standalone brands as well as marketplaces. Individual brands can use it for category or brand filtering, whereas marketplaces can use it for custom filtering on profit margins made or focus products to be promoted. The next setting we talk about is campaign priority. Campaign priority is very important to understand when the same product is being targeted from multiple campaigns. If one campaign has a higher priority than the others, the campaign with a higher priority will bid. For example, imagine two campaigns share a product. One campaign has a higher priority and the other has a medium priority. The bid from the higher campaign priority will be used even if the bid in the medium priority campaign is set to a larger amount. Campaign priorities play a key role in marketplace scenarios. An important application is when you want to promote the same products for different search terms differently. In this case, having two campaigns in different priorities with the right set of negatives added in each of them would help drive incremental transactions at lower costs. Once we have the right campaign set up with all the settings in place, we need to couple them with the right device location settings to boost the performance. To understand this better, let's take a look at the industry insights report Sokrati has generated using 1.6 billion user events that shows stark difference in performance trends for different geos and devices. As you can see here, Tier 1 cities contribute to more than 60% of the transactions across all online shopping in India. While the conversion rates do not vary significantly, we generally observe a dip in basket value for Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities, causing a dip in ROI, making it an important optimization axis. As a best practice, we recommend you to choose the cities you want to target specifically where shipping is possible instead of choosing the country as a whole. Coming to the device settings, websites that are not mobile responsive will have higher bounce rates on mobile devices. Across Indian market, mobile devices drive higher number of clicks at lower CPCs compared to desktop. But owing to lower conversion rates, we don't see efficiencies translate to CPT. To counter this and have the most efficient campaigns, set device bid modifiers at campaign and at group level that help maximize performance.
Thanks, Mani. That was very insightful. Great to hear from you. So we are now actually going to go back to Tarang and hear from him on Google specific insights and what he has to offer. So Tarang, off to you.
Right. So let's get started. Imagine the most beautiful beach you have ever been to. Imagine the sun setting over the beautiful sky, hanging over that beach. And imagine a cafe on this beautiful beach. You own this cafe. So, if you own this cafe, how do you run this cafe on the beach? Well, the best way to run this cafe on the beach is step 1, get the best fish. Go to the sea and get the best fish that you can get. Let's call it being there. Once you have caught all the fish, the next step is to prepare some awesome dishes with it and let the world know that you are the best when it comes to fish sandwiches. Let's call this the be prepared moment. Now that you have your fish ready in your restaurant and people know that you're serving it, the only thing that will keep them coming back and bring their friends along is if you serve it well. Good fish served well means happy customers. Happy customers means happier friends, all of them coming over again to you. Let's call this being good. So running a shopping campaign is very similar to running a restaurant. Let's talk about being there. This is a company which sells bicycles, some spare parts, some clothing, some apparel, and some other knickknacks. But selling bicycles is their main line of business. If you look at their shopping campaign, you realize that the way they have set things up is that they have different bikes. These bikes offer them different profit margins. A cruiser bike, being a kid's tricycle, has low margins. It's a low ticket value product. And a triathlon bike, which is a professional bicycle, gives them the maximum margins. So if you look here, you see that the cruiser bikes has the minimum bid, and triathlon bikes have a bid which is almost twice as high as a cruiser bike. So the idea is to understand what variants of your product give you the maximum returns and bid accordingly. Their secondary line of business is clothing and spare parts. So as you can see, what they have done is just clubbed them into categories, and they're bidding at category levels because the margins on a jersey is not very different from the margins on a pair of shorts. And then, just to be sure that every single thing on their product feed is being targeted, they have added an all products filter. What this all products filter does is it acts as a catch-all net so that if your inventory keeps changing, it makes sure that you are not missing out on certain products which are not being targeted. So if there is one thing you could remember, always, always, always add the all products segmentation. Okay, so now you have the fish. You have to present it out to your audience. And although we did talk about this in the last webinar, let's just revisit some of the best practices. So if you look at this example right here, you need to have a brand name and you have to have a clean image. These are the two most common factors which will influence a user clicking on your ad, right? Let's move on. Now you have someone who has come into your restaurant and you need to serve them. What if you don't serve them well? Imagine Flipkart. Flipkart's website is today the best e-commerce website in India. All the metrics speak for themselves. And if you look at their experience, you'll realize that you can move on to the website and buy a product in a minute or less. What I want you to do is when you're designing your shopping campaign, don't just stop at AdWords. Do not stop at AdWords. Think about your website. Think about a user who's coming onto your website and try and look at things from his perspective on how long will it take for that user to go through the whole cycle and purchase the product. So just to recap, how do you run a great shopping campaign? You catch the best fish and you be there. That's bids. You provide the best products and that's your feed. And then you provide a great user experience, which is your website. So that's all we had. And let's now start getting into some questions and let's see if we can answer them for you.
Thanks, Tarang. Thanks again for the fantastic presentation. Really appreciate your insights. So just a quick recap, both in terms of Tarang and Mani's presentation. So today we discussed in terms of setting up the and how setting up the campaigns correctly and having the right settings in place. Once we have that done, the next question is about how do we do the right bidding. So that is actually a tee up for our next webinar. It should be coming sometime soon in August. So that's just a heads up. Moving on to some of the questions. So the first question I've got is, what is a click share? How is it calculated? And how can I increase my click share? So Mani, do you want to take it up?
Yeah, thanks, Rohit. So, click share is a click equivalent of an impression share metric that we have. So, okay, before I move on to click share, I'd actually like Tarang to talk a bit about impression share. So I can take it up from there. So, over to you, Tarang.
Okay, right. So impression share, I think all of us have heard a lot about the search impression share. So I'm just going to give you a recap on what it is, and then I'll take you on to what it means in shopping world. Okay, the search impression share, very, very simply put, is how many times did you actually show up an impression versus how many times were you eligible to show an impression. That's what search impression share means. A high impression share means that most of the times the ads that you're trying to target are showing up, and a low one inversely means that your ads are not showing up enough. Now, the difference between the search impression share and the shopping impression share is that in a normal search ad, each domain can show an ad only once. If I'm looking for blue dresses and Amazon sells 5 different blue dresses, I can only see one blue dress ad from Amazon.com on search. However, on shopping, Amazon can show me 5 blue dress ads. That is the difference, and hence the difference in calculation takes that into account. So what does it do? For each shopping auction, if there is more than one ad eligible to show up, that impression count and that impression opportunity is assigned to the highest ranking ad. What does that mean? That means that in theory, you can never have 100% impression share on shopping if your feed overlaps. So if you're selling a blue shirt and you're selling 3 of those, your impression share can at max be 33%. So that's what it means when it comes to search and shopping impression share specifically.
Okay. So yeah, that is very useful, Tarang, in understanding impression share. Now relating the same thing to click share, what click share basically means that how many times people are clicking on your ad versus how many times your ad was eligible to be clicked. So it basically takes into account the impression share versus how good your effective CTR is. So when you look at product groups tab in shopping campaigns, generally see something called as benchmark CTR. Benchmark CTR is something that Google has benchmarked for that vertical and for those set of products. So the one way to increase share is basically by increasing your CTR. Even though if you're serving the right number of impressions, even though you have a 90% impression share, if your CTR is much lower than the account or vertical level benchmark, then your click share would automatically drop. So it's a combination of two things. Click share would basically be how many times you're serving impressions, which could be a factor of your bids, versus also how good your CTR is.
Thanks, Mani. The next question is coming from Alok, and his question is, should all products be placed in the same ad group, or generally what should be the campaign structure?
Okay. Uh, Alok, like we have discussed, right? Like mentioned before, identify where different products have a different trends in performance. So let's say you have a field of 100 or 500 products which belong to different categories of clothing or footwear and mobile accessories. In these scenarios, I think it's very recommended and preferable to have separate campaigns, because for a clothing campaign, your cost per order could be much lower than for an electronic campaign. So while electronics or mobile devices typically would have a basket value of 8,000, whereas clothing is something that would be around 1,000 to 1,500. So the cost per order metrics for each of these are going to be different, and hence you need to have separate campaigns for each of these. Now, in this example, we talk about category, but in other examples, it could be a brand. For example, if your website is based on brands and your offers are generally based on brands, then having campaigns at a brand level is more efficient. I hope I've answered your question.
Thanks again, Mani. The next question is from Shubham. Actually, there are a couple of questions from Shubham. So the first one is, how many characters should we include in the feed title and description? And the second question is around, please help understanding the ways and methods to get our products triggered on search engines. So yeah, I think we are in a way revisiting our last webinar. So good question to take up.
So, Shubham, in terms of feed titles, the character limit that Google has is 150 characters, and for description, the limit is 5,000 characters. However, Google recommends having 70 characters in the feed title, as it would have more weightage in terms of serving ads. And what we have generally seen is have all the important key search terms in the first 45 characters, so that when people are looking at the ad in the title, they're able to relate to what they are searching for. So 45 is recommended and will give you the best results. 70 is what Google recommends, and 150 is the ideal limit. Anything beyond 150 is going to be cropped by Google. And in terms of descriptions, it's 5,000 characters, and the weightage in description also goes from left to right as you keep moving on. And the next question is about understanding ways and methods to get our products triggered on search engines. And yeah, like going back to the previous webinar, have understand what people are searching for in terms of your catalog. So have the right hierarchy of product types. Enable Google to understand what you're selling by using the right GTINs and Google product categories. And then each of these will help maximize your feed efficiency and help Google understand what you're exactly selling, so the impressions will increase.
In fact, can we have, since we have Tarang online with us as well, Tarang, you want to add to this particular question on particularly the part around understanding the ways and methods to get the products triggered on the particularly the Google search engine?
Sure. Right. So I think we covered this the last time around, so I'll keep it very, very short. Just keep three things in mind. If we know you are selling the original product, if we know what are the details of the product, and if we know that this product is available on your website at the same price as on the feed, we will serve it. Just keep that one thing in mind. The more you tell us, the better we know. The better we know, the better we are representing your product out to your customers. So use the limits, keep the information relevant so that we understand what you're trying to sell. That's basically about it.
Sure. Excellent. I mean, very basic and in-depth information at the same time on how to make the keyword to product link. So next question that has come up is coming from Jayant. How do we measure the ROI and how can we ensure good ROI? There's a follow-up to that. What is the benchmark ROI for nutrition products like muscle building, 100% whey protein products? So I think it's a question around a specific product, but we should be able to take this one up.
Okay, that's a good question, Jay. So ROI typically can be calculated from two places. One thing is using the Google Analytics, where you have revenue and cost, so you can calculate your ROAS. The other way is actually configuring your AdWords pixels to capture this attribute called conversion value. Once you have that, you have conversion value versus cost that's available directly from AdWords. Because of attribution difference, there could be a difference conversion value by cost that's been shown on AdWords and analytics. But directionally, it's a very good way to actually track what is being driven at each campaign and product level. Now, so ensuring good ROI comes from setting up your campaigns the right way and using different data analytics. So we'll be talking about this extensively in the next webinar, but to give you an idea, there's a dimensions tab that gives you a lot of analytics on how shopping campaign performance can be segmented for different product types, for different SKUs, for different locations, devices, item IDs, and on different custom labels as well. So using all these analytics and then building the right sort of bidding, programmatic bidding and real-time bidding will help you generate the best ROI. In terms of nutrition products, so we have had a couple of health clients in terms of health vertical, and where we have seen ROIs boost up to 2 to 2.5, which is the revenue versus cost metric. And this is the similar trend that we see across geographies in India as well as in US and UK markets.
So I'll add a bit to that as well. So when we measure ROI, right, ROI could potentially be measured on a couple of other significant metrics as well. So one is your revenue-based ROI. Second, it could be on your margins as well. And an important matrix we have started tracking from our experience is ROI in terms of add to carts as well. So one is ROI on transactions, but if we could also track revenue in terms of the add to cart revenue, that's a significant milestone in the buying journey as well. So just to add a couple of points. Next question I have, what are possible reasons why campaigns don't get impressions?
Okay. Okay, there could be multiple reasons why we generally don't get impressions, but a good troubleshooting point at first would be to look at if the account level budget in your AdWords is in place or not, because generally what tends to happen is the account level budget gets exhausted and ads are not served. Once you have that, the next level of troubleshooting would be in terms of understanding if all the products are reflecting in your AdWords. So what happens is your Google Merchant Center sees a lot of errors, disapprovals, and warnings, which tends to have account suspensions, or even if products are disapproved, don't reflect in the product groups tab. And to just check this, go to your product groups tab and see how many products are actually eligible, which shows this product group has X number of products. So that would be one reason why your impressions don't get served in ads.
Thanks, Mani. Next question we have from Rob. So I'm running a shopping campaign for jewelry vertical and notice that ring related ads are serving for searches related to bangles. Why is it so and how we can avoid it? I think it's a very relevant question to be asked, and a lot of the attendees would have a similar experience across their products. So yeah, good question to take up.
So Rob, I'd suggest that one reason to debug this, or one way to look at this, would be to actually understand what are the descriptions and the titles for the ring products that we have in place, and what is a campaign. So if we have separate campaigns for rings versus bangles, negatives can be used very effectively to make sure that we don't show up on bangle related search terms for rings. So what we can also do to increase the efficiency of this process is use AdWords scripts that will help you automatically find out search themes on what search terms are we showing up for what kind of products and how you can negate them. The other way is using GPC effectively until the fifth level or the fourth level, where you can map the bangle product specifically to bangles versus rings specifically to rings. So to sum it up, one, understand what's there in the feed. If you have any bangle related search terms, or if you have stuffed very generic jewelry related search themes in this feed, that could be one reason why it's happening. And the way to fix it would be to have different campaigns for each of these product types, use negatives very effectively, and then come up with search theme analysis to see which one is working for you and which is not.
Very nice. This question, and I like this question. This is coming in from Rohit, and his question is: Hi, I have added about 1,100 products in merchant the GMC Google Merchant Center, but only I mean, in fact, about 780 of those are disapproved. So why is that happening? I would think that Rohit, we need a bit more context into the vertical, but we would try answering it a bit generally.
Right. So product disapprovals happen for multiple reasons. One, in terms of how we are violating Google shopping policies. So Google has a policy in terms of the products that we can sell. For example, it does not allow us to sell tobacco related items, or we are not allowed to sell guns or weaponry related items. So one way would be to look at that. Even if you have some products that are perfumes but contain adult related search terms, then you can apply for manual review in that case to make these products approve again. The other way, the other reason why product disapprovals happen is if your product pages are not accessible when Google crawls them, or this is one reason that we typically see product pages are not accessible via mobile devices. And the other reason that we see is if your image links or if your image, links are not accessible and there's no image provided in the feed. So the best way to actually debug this problem and know where it's coming from is to go to the diagnostics tab. And in the diagnostics tab, you have three sections. One is on account, one is on feeds, one is on products. So go to the products tab and then identify each of these disapprovals. So Google gives you a list of SKUs and their probable reasons for why each of them is disapproved. Once you're able to have more information on why it's disapproved, actions can be taken to fix them, and we should be able to see them live again.
We have a question from Abbas, and probably last 2 or 3 questions that we'll be able to take up today. So Abbas's question is: if we use multiple campaigns, how do we avoid an overlap? So if products, the same product is set up under different campaigns and product groups, how do we make sure that we avoid the overlap? Tarang, you want to take up this question?
Sure. Okay, so Abbas, the simplest way to do this is to set product filters when you're setting up campaigns. The suggestion I would have is, if you are doing that, be sure to have one campaign with no product filters, with a targeting for all products. So the simplest way to do this is to create different campaigns, have filters on each of these campaigns, and at the filtering level, you can filter out products from your feed. To make sure that you're not missing out on any traffic, create a campaign outside of any of these with no product filters within all products targeting. Make sure that this campaign priority is set to low. So that will solve your problem.
Brilliant. Tarang, actually another question for you. This is coming from Rob again. So if there are 5 shopping ads shown in Google, is there any way to show my ad at the first among the 5? On what basis is it aligned, and whether through bid relevancy? So I mean, ad rank, I think that's a great question for you.
Yes. So the way we arrange these 5 products is based on ad rank. Ad rank is very similar to how it is calculated in search. So there is no good answer to, so there's no definitive answer. There's no one thing that you can do to make sure you are the number 1 out of those. There is no, so the way it works is we have a minimum quality threshold. If you do not meet that threshold, we will not show your ad at all. Once you meet that threshold is when we decide that yes, we will show your ad. Now, beyond that, we look at the relevancy, which is a function of the user's search query, your title, your description, your historical performance, and your bids. And we combine all of these signals into one ad rank, and then we surface these ads. So just by bids alone, it's not really possible to make sure that you show up on number one every single time.
Sure. So, Tarang, if I hear you right, we're discussing the relevancy between, let's say, the keyword, the ad, the landing page. So, multiple plays come
Yes.
into picture.
Yes.
Okay. Probably the last one for the day, and I don't have a name against it, but the question is, how do I decide the right device adjustments for me?
Okay, so when it comes to optimizing at a device level, the first thing that we need to understand is what is the metric that you're optimizing for as a whole. So there's a difference between optimizing for cost per order, there's a difference between optimizing for conversion rates versus ROI metrics. So if you're tracking each of these in AdWords, identify the one that it's a final goal that we want to achieve. If it's a cost per order, you need to understand that your right setting should be able to finally give you a blended cost per order at an account level of 500. Once that is divided, what typically tends to happen is we optimize each of the portfolios individually. So we optimize desktop to have a cost per order for 500 and also mobile to have a cost per order for 500. However, the best practice is actually to look at it cumulatively, and this comes from economics portfolio theory that we have in place, where we understand what's the blended average that we can get. So even if desktop is running at 300 and mobile is running at 700, which is still fine if the incremental number of orders that you can drive from there is higher. And this typically happens because of the change in conversion rates. So and in terms of setting it up, device adjustments can be done both at campaign and ad group level. And if you have an ad group level mobile page adjustment set up, then that overrides the campaign level one. So understand the metric that you want to optimize for. Then don't optimize it at each level individually, but use a portfolio theory to optimize for the cumulative or account level blended average. And then use both campaign and ad group level settings to drive the best performance.
Cool. So we come to the end of the Q&A section at this point. Again, to recap, in the first webinar session, we covered the feed setups and the best practices around feeds. Today, we covered a larger discussion on the AdWords setup. So coming up, we'll be announcing the dates very soon, but the next session will be around bid management and best practices around your funnel management as well. So very soon we'll be announcing the date for the class 3. At Sokrati, we have also published the e-commerce research report for the Q1 of 2016, and it covers a lot of insights into the Indian e-com industry, and there has been interest expressed by a lot of the attendees. So we'll be sending out the report shortly to all the attendees. Thanks again for attending, and looking forward to hosting you all at the webinar 3. Also would like to thank Mani and Tarang for their valuable time, and would look forward to more insights from them in the next session. Thanks all.